All right, I'm gonna share my screen and start us off. Thank you, everybody, for joining us tonight. Give me 1 second here. Okay, can everybody see that?
Yes.
Okay, thumbs up from somebody there. Yeah, perfect. Okay, so thanks again for joining us. My name is Susan McKenzie, and I'm the provincial coordinator for the Transplant Ambassador Program. And we have an exciting night, I think, for you. Our plan is to start now and to go till about 8:30. I'm going to start with just a few slides about the Transplant Ambassador Program, and then we have Roseanne Alberts here from Trillium, the Trillium Health Partners, to talk a little bit more about living donation, and then we'll go right into our panel of living donors. And tonight we have with us 10 living donors who are
Susan, you're muted. We can't hear you. Thank you.
Wow, thank you. Somebody, yeah, I think, did you hear the part of that? Did you hear part of it? Okay, good.
Part of it.
Okay, so so basically what I was just saying is that we're, I'm going to give you a little bit of information about TAP, then we're going to go to Roseanne Alberts to talk about the Living Donor Program. She's with Trillium Health Partners in Mississauga. And then we'll move to our TAP panel where we have 10 extraordinary living donors here to chat about their story. And then we hope to leave at least 20 minutes at the end for any Q&A. Okay. So this is just a picture of all of our panelists tonight. I wanted to share with you that they all have their Transplant Ambassador emails that you can reach out to them if you want to learn more from any of them about their stories. And I'll show this again at the end. And Alex Freund with our program will also put the emails in the chat. So just a little bit about the program. We were established in 2016 as a research study, and we launched in 13 of the renal centers in Ontario, and we are where we worked for the last 4 years, and we will be launching in the additional 14. So we'll be in 27 renal centers as part of the care provided. So our mantra and TAP here really is about being able to tell our story and in hopes that it's going to help someone else. So I think that's a great thing to remember for everyone who's maybe in working through a difficult time. But for us, we are excited that one day we are now telling our stories, and we hope that it is part of someone else's survival guide. And that is the power behind the Transplant Ambassador Program. One is give a little bit of context for anyone who may not be familiar with the numbers. These are Ontario transplant numbers in 2018, 2019, and 2020. You can see that in 2020, no surprise, there was a big dip in the numbers, and especially in the living donor numbers down to 171 from 242. Certainly 2019 was a banner year. And then during COVID, we had some challenges, and we are really hoping to pick that up from where it was. Also, again, for some context, in 2019, and obviously these numbers are higher now, but there were 10,000 people who were receiving care in multi-care kidney clinics, so pre-dialysis, and 12,000 people on dialysis in Ontario. So our program is really about sharing our stories and our lived experience and providing support. All of our transplant ambassadors, of which there were 86 a couple of months ago, and we are now, since we're now expanding, we are bringing on another 100 or so. So we've got, we're probably now sitting at around 130, 140 And we are all living donors or transplant recipients who are living with a successful transplant, either a living donor transplant or a deceased donor transplant. And our goal is to connect with patients and potential donors and their families at all stages of the kidney journey. But ideally, we're connecting with people as early as possible so that there is an opportunity to work up a kidney donor for a preemptive transplant. And in order to do that, obviously, we need to speak with people who aren't yet on dialysis. Because of COVID, we started out in the clinics and working in the 13 clinics and being in waiting rooms and examination rooms and other spots talking with patients. And after March 13th of 2020, when the volunteers, for the most part, left hospitals, we launched a virtual program with Zoom and telephone, and we've been rolling that forward ever since. And we will continue that on those platforms, even when we are able to move into the hospital, which is hopefully sometime later this year. So in terms of the Transplant Ambassador Program, and there are some great peer support programs, across the province and across the country. But there's a couple of unique differences about TAP. All of our TAP ambassadors have vulnerable sector police checks, and they're all trained and onboarded both by TAP and by a hospital in Ontario. Excuse me. As part of our, the fact that we are a research initiative, we do adhere to strict privacy and confidentiality protocols in the work that we do. We capture and analyze our data in order to understand our impact and to see whether providing this kind of education in the clinics, as well as by Zoom and phone, is that having an impact on increasing transplant rates? And we did see in the first 4 years that it was, which is why we're expanding into the additional centers in Ontario. Our goal is to build ongoing relationships with patients and potential donors and help them as they go through their journey. So not just one call, but hopefully we're able to help them as they go through the process. And now that we've launched our virtual program, we can connect patients and donors with anyone across the province. So not just at the local hospital, but they may want to connect with someone at another center who speaks the same language they speak or who has a similar transplant experience. And so we're able to do that much better now that we've launched into our virtual platform. We're not videos, we are real people, and we are available to speak with anybody through our secure TAP email. So we do encourage you to reach out to us. We do have a commitment of reaching out to anybody who contacts us within 2 days of hearing from them. And again, I mentioned that we're integrated into the renal centers, and our goal is really to normalize the idea of transplant as early as possible and to provide some inspiration and hope that there's light at the end of the tunnel, no matter how ill you may be feeling right now, that it is possible to get through this and to get through it well. And lastly, but very importantly, we are an independent patient-led program, and we are 100% volunteer-driven. We are part of the Access to Kidney Transplant Framework, which is coordinated by the Ontario Renal Network and partner with Trillium Gift of Life in the work that we do. And we are one of the 5 pillars of that strategy. The goal of the strategy, the second part of the strategy, is to actually increase living kidney donor transplants to 300 by 2025. And you probably don't remember, but the slide I showed with the numbers showed 171 transplants last year. So that's the increase that we're looking for. This is a little look at our new website that we'll be launching in the next week or so. Interestingly, again, we've made it a lot more interactive so that people can scroll down and they can actually, here's my next slide. Oops. They can actually see our ambassador directory, and you can scroll through this little directory and you can see many people who have videos And you can also see whether they have a similar kidney journey to you and what languages they speak, and all of those things. We are really very evenly divided in terms of 50% donors and 50% ambassadors, 50% recipients. And this is just a little slide that shows the diversity that we currently have in the team, and we definitely hope to expand that as we go across the country. Go across the province. And just a little commercial to please join us on our social media platforms and help spread the word. And again, here's that, we'll put this up at the end, information about our panel. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Roseanne. I'm just going to load up your slides here, Roseanne.
And hi, can everybody hear me?
Yep, that's great.
Okay. Hi, and thanks, Sue. Thanks for inviting me tonight to talk. My role, I'm a pre-transplant coordinator here at Trillium Health Partners. So I'm responsible to help patients and families and our staff with transplant education, as well as get our patients through the transplant process. And hopefully, help them find a living donor so that they can get a transplant quicker than being on dialysis. As Sue mentioned, there is this Ontario initiative that's currently happening, and we have been part of it since the beginning. And it is because of that initiative that was designed to increase awareness about transplant and make sure that all patients have access to transplant. Not that everybody is a transplant candidate, but for those that are, transplantable, to see how we can make things work for them so that they can get a kidney transplant versus being on dialysis. And as well, part of that initiative is to raise awareness about living donations so that we can hopefully increase the number of living donations that are happening in the province. And it's through this program that I have met Sue and many, many other wonderful ambassadors. We've had ambassadors in our clinics, so in our pre-dialysis clinics, we've had them in our home hemo clinic, we've had them in our dialysis unit. They come and they speak at our education nights that we have for our patients. So they're wonderful volunteers. You're going to meet many of them tonight. Not that they're all from Trillium, but these are the people that, really can help you and support you through the whole transplant journey. So whether you are a recipient or whether you're going to be a living donor, they're a great additional piece to education for transplant. So I'm just going to give you a little bit of information. Sue, to the next slide, please. I'm going to talk about some of the benefits of transplant, of living donations, the types of living donation, a little bit of stats, and then a little bit of a program, a reimbursement program. So just kind of give you a little bit of an overview. So the biggest thing for benefit of being able to receive a living kidney donation versus waiting on the deceased list is you have a shorter period of time on dialysis, okay? When you're on dialysis, for the most part, particularly as you're approaching the need for dialysis, you're not feeling the greatest. You've got low energy, you've got fatigue, your appetite may be affected. You may be having, you may have none of these symptoms as well, but you just, for the general part, your overall sense of well-being is diminished. So we want to try and decrease those complications by shortening your time on dialysis, by giving you a living kidney donation, if it's possible. As well, we want to decrease costs to the patients. Being on dialysis, sometimes patients, their employment gets affected because they're not feeling well enough, or their caregiver has to take off time in order to help them, or you have travel expenses to get back and forth to the dialysis unit and parking expenses. So there are implications that way as well. So again, if we can get a patient a transplant sooner, then they don't have to incur those costs. And as well as, of course, the cost to the healthcare system. Being on dialysis is an expensive treatment, as well as increased hospitalizations because you are a dialysis patient. So I did put a little comparison here, which I think is quite interesting, and that's the 2017 to 2019, the number of days that a deceased donor waits for a kidney transplant was 362 days, so about 3.8 years. where when compared with a living donor transplant, so if somebody had the opportunity to have a living donor, they only waited like 3/4 of a year. So as I said, the longer you're on dialysis, the more health complications can occur. So we can try to minimize that by having somebody receive a living donor kidney. Next slide, please, Sue. Did it? Oh, sorry. Yeah, it's there. Sorry, my fault. I wasn't reading it. Benefits, some other benefits that aren't specifically because of shorter time on dialysis is that you get some improved outcomes. For instance, the kidney, if you're having a living donor kidney transplant, the kidney's not waiting around. So with a deceased donor transplant, the kidney has to be removed from the donor. It's possibly flown, from one part of Ontario to another part of Ontario. It's waiting, it's kind of in transit. Whereas the living donor transplant, the kidney is going directly or almost directly within a few hours anyhow, from the donor over to the recipient. So that makes a big difference in the short-term as well as long-term survival of that kidney. And so speaking of survival, the living donor average is about 15 to 17 years. And I remember that's average. I've seen patients that, have had a kidney for 40 years, but unfortunately I've seen patients where the kidneys, stopped working much sooner as well. But you compare that to a deceased donor, and you're looking at 10 to 12 years as the average. So it is quite significant. Also, another benefit is longer patient survival. So statistically, a patient who receives a living donor transplant can have an average of about 10 extra years of life. So that's wonderful. Their quality of life is better, again, because they haven't been on dialysis for a long time. As well as productivity just in life in general. They're in their workforce, they're able to travel, they're able to see their family. Well, with COVID, not so much anymore, but it's hopefully getting better for all of us. But yeah, so there's that extra patient survival, as being able to receive that living kidney donor. You get to schedule your own surgical date. So it's planned. You have control over it, depending on what your working is or what the donor's availability to donate is. Maybe because they're seasonal work, maybe it's better to do it in January, February, or March. So there's scheduling that can happen to make it work for people. And one of the big things too is every living donor transplant takes somebody off the deceased waiting list. Our deceased waiting lists in this province are 3 to 6 years. It's a long time of waiting, and even longer for some patients. So if we can get anybody off of the deceased list faster, then that is great. We don't add as many people because we have these wonderful living donors who've come forward and are willing to give their kidney to their loved one or their friend or family, whoever it may be. It really does make a difference in the long term. And then, let's look at it from the donor perspective. They have a sense of pride. They've been able to help somebody who's in need, make their life a little bit better, decrease some of the challenges that person is facing. So those are just some of the benefits of living kidney donation. Next slide, please. Now, Sue had this slide. We had a little bit of difference, but what I'm just going to show you too is a couple of things from 2018 to 2020. Really, the numbers that were on the kidney waiting list is the same, and between 1,100 and 1,200 patients that are on that waiting list. So any patients, if you think about it, over those 3 years, there's 2, 4, 6, 8, like 900 patients that you could almost be adding in. Sorry, maybe my math is wrong. 8, 6, 700 anyhow. Patients that would be added in from 2018, they'd still be waiting in 2020 for a transplant. Okay, so living donation, and so that just increases how long patients are going to wait. And another thing too, again, about the initiative that is happening, this is where you do see the numbers from 2018 to 2019, by having our ambassadors, by trying to increase awareness about living donation. You do see that there was a significant jump there in that 1 year alone. Unfortunately, yes, COVID did happen and still is happening. So we do have the drop in the 2020. There was a few months where they weren't even doing transplants. I know from our patients that were still trying to get a living donor transplant that were ready before COVID or almost ready, literally, we just finally got through them. Like now everybody that was from that era has had their transplants. So it's been a bit of a catch up, and I think 2021 will show some better numbers for that. Next slide, please. So types of living donor transplants. Okay, you have direct donation. So that means I'm able to give to my sister. You have preemptive living donation, which is where you have you get a transplant before you've even had to start dialysis. You have the kidney paired exchange, and then you have the non-directed anonymous donor. So those last three, I'll talk a little bit more in detail, or just a little overview, not too much detail. So with the preemptive, so the patient doesn't have to start dialysis. They're healthier going into the surgery. It's really the optimal type of transplant to receive if it's possible. So when you're in the pre-dialysis clinics and they start talking to you about living donation, if there's somebody that's available, then this is where we can start getting you ready for a kidney transplant if possible. If you don't have a living donor, you don't get onto the deceased waiting list until you have started dialysis. And again, you're going to have better long-term survival and increased quality of life. And this as well, by not having to start dialysis, that's another decrease to the burden on the healthcare system. Okay, so next slide, please. Okay, so you have the kidney paired exchange. So this is a great program. This is when, like, I now can't give to my sister, and Joe over here can't give to his brother. So what they do is they put all of these incompatible pairs into a national database, and they come up with pairings so that patients can receive a living donor transplant, although it's not the person that, say, wanted to donate to them because it's a different blood type or they have an antibody against them. So what happens essentially is, just as this picture shows, you have an incompatible pair. So I can't give to my sister, but I can give to the next guy. And then the next donor can give to the following guy in group C. And then in group C, the donor there, who's the red guy, can donate to the recipient in group A. So everybody ends up with a living donor transplant, which is, again, like we've been saying, it is the better of the two if it is possible. Next slide, please. Another thing too is in regards to donors, so this is just a little bit more about the paired exchange, is that when you may have a couple of different donors, so they can also go into this paired exchange. So just because they don't match you, they'll match somebody else, hopefully, and it increases your chance of actually being matched. And when I say matched, I mean where they take all of these mismatched pairs, put them into the database, and then the computer system does what it has to, and then different strips come out so that they say, well, this is how some what we call chains of transplants can happen, so that you can have like that picture where the one goes to the next, goes to the next. And so that happens about every 4 months is where they run those cycles to see who they can transplant. Average wait time from that is about 9.5 months from the first time the match cycle that you are in, which is great. It's still within a year generally of being on dialysis, hopefully, if you're lucky, depending on where you start your transplant workup. So what I really liked, okay, and this leads into my next slide, is, and this is a nice new stat from January of 2022. So this paired exchange program is Canada-wide. So there's been 872 recipients who have received a living donor transplant. So if you think about it too, if we had to throw those 872 people back onto the deceased waiting list, again, way goes up the numbers for waiting time for our patients. So having taken these mismatched pairs and being able to transplant them with a living donor again is such a benefit for our patient population. But what's really interesting here is I have it broken up where you have 36% is from the closed pairing. And what I mean by the closed pairing is the previous diagram that I had just shown you, where you had the 3 individual pairs. But 64% actually of these transplants, so 562 of them, happened because of a domino effect. And that domino effect actually comes from somebody from a non-directed anonymous donor. So the next slide, please. And what that means is somebody who has come forward They don't have someone that they need to give their kidney to. They don't know someone specifically that they want to donate to, but out of the goodness of their heart, this altruistic person, this good Samaritan has come forward and come to the transplant center and said, I want to donate one of my kidneys if I can. So what happens is, because here's a live kidney that they're willing to donate, it ends up setting off a different type of chain. So then you have the anonymous donor who donates into one of the pairs that brings off the donor, as this picture shows, the donor from pair A who's able to give to pair B. And then pair B actually is able to give to somebody on the transplant waiting list. So instead of receiving a deceased donor transplant, they end up receiving a living donor transplant. And again, the life of the kidney is longer, and as well, they're getting off of dialysis sooner. So the whole personal, like the patient as well as the healthcare, everybody is coming out to the good in this. And as well, the person who's donated, I'm sure, feels amazing having changed somebody else's life. And you're going to meet at least one of these non-directed anonymous donors tonight through the panel that's going to talk. And I can't say enough just about living donation and living donors. It's the most amazing gift anyone can give somebody. Next slide, please. So you just kind of wonder, okay, well, this is great. She's talked about what living donation is, but how do I actually give my kidney? So you would have a health questionnaire that you would have to submit to your transplant center. We refer our patients to Hamilton. So I always give our patients the information about how to contact the donor team there. The health questionnaire is quite extensive. You know, they need to know your health history. They want to have your blood type. So it's a bit of a process that the person, or a bit of a form the person has to fill in. They submit it to the donor team at the transplant center. So the donors are worked up through one team and the recipients are worked up through the other team. They keep things confidential so that there's no bias between the two sides. Even myself being a pre-transplant coordinator at a referring center, we're not a transplant center here. I can't find out anything about the donor because they're not our patients. So it's very confidential. And then the donor has a series of tests and appointments that they have to attend in order to be cleared for transplant, so that they're able to, that the transplant team feels that they're safe to go forward with transplant, with donating their kidney. So they have to have some heart tests done. They have to have imaging done, like, you know, maybe chest x-rays, abdominal ultrasounds, renal angiogram. So they're looking specifically at the kidneys to look at their anatomy, to see which is the best kidney to donate, which, if there's any issues. You know, they have blood work done. They have blood pressure monitoring, because one of the reasons a lot of patients, unfortunately, are on dialysis is because of uncontrolled blood pressure. Plus, they also have to meet with the transplant team members, go to several appointments. So this process can really take them months to get through, and it really depends on how available that donor is. People are working and how many days can they get to the transplant center to complete test. Some of it can be done locally through your family doctor, but most, I think, really does get done at the transplant center. And then just one little thing, just so you know, this is a great program. It's called PRELOD, so Program for Reimbursing the Expense of Living Organ Donors. So there is specific eligibility criteria, and the transplant center, the donor team will talk to the donors about this. But some of the expenses that will be covered, you know, would be mileage and flights, whether you're flying from in Canada or out of Canada, accommodations. Say you live in, you know, 100 kilometers away, but you got an 8 o'clock appointment at the transplant center the next morning. You may have to stay at a hotel the night before. So there is some funding available for our living donors. There's also a little bit of funding that's available to support loss of income. They'll look at it if you can't apply for EI, or you've used up your vacation time, or if you don't have sick time coverage. There is some funding there as well that's part of this PRELOD program. And again, like I said, they'll go into the specifics with anyone that is willing to donate. And this is available, this reimbursement is available for anyone who lives in province, out of province, or even out of country. So that is what I have to say in regards to giving you just an overview of what living donation is. I hope it's helped, and I hope you really enjoy the next story, the panel of people that are going to speak to you about their experiences, because that is the most impressive way of learning about transplant. Thank you.
Thank you, Roseanne. That was amazing. Appreciate all of your thoughts. We are going to hold questions until the very end so we can have our panel tell their stories. So we're going to go right into the amazing panel. Thank you in advance for all of you who are here and willing to tell your story. We're going to start off with Christine from Sunnybrook. Welcome, Christine.
Hello, everybody. Hello, can you hear me? Okay, all right. Well, my name is Christine, and I've been a transplant ambassador at Sunnybrook in Toronto for a little over 3 years now. I donated a kidney to my brother 7 years ago. And my workup was done actually in Toronto, but not at the transplant center because my brother is situated in Montreal. So I did some of the workup in Women's College Hospital, which was my hospital, and some of it in Montreal at the transplant center. So that's how kind of things, so it was an out of province living kidney donation. What led me to embark on this journey was actually it started over 30 years ago when my brother got diagnosed with a condition called the Berger syndrome, which is an autoimmune disease that affects your kidneys. So we knew that at some point in time he was going to have to go on dialysis, and that he was going to either go on dialysis or need a kidney. And I had made the promise to him at the time that if I was eligible to donate, that I would be more than happy to do so. Unfortunately, well before that, the time that he was expected to need a kidney happened, he got kidney disease. He got kidney cancer. They removed one of his kidneys, and then he immediately had to go on dialysis. So of course, I didn't forget my promise. The problem is that he was, like many recipients, a very reluctant recipient, didn't want to put anybody in harm's way. And so even once he was cleared of his cancer, he didn't necessarily guide me as to where I could go. So this is one of my learnings. But eventually I did find out how to go about it. And went through the workup process. It took about 4 months. I had the luxury of not being working at the time, so I could dedicate a lot of my time to this workup and keep things moving forward as fast as possible. The surgery took place on a Thursday. The recovery was very quick. By the Saturday, they were ready to discharge me. The very same day of the surgery, I was walking down the aisle the aisle of the ward to go and see my brother in his room with my IV drip. Now, my surgery was done laparoscopically, which is minimally invasive, and I'm told that the recovery is a bit faster that way. So that might be one of the reasons. But after that, I just felt a little bit sluggish, maybe for the first week. I think it probably had more to do with the anesthetics than it did with the kidney donation. But after that, I was like ready to get back into business. Obviously, not being able to lift anything heavy for 6 weeks while the incision where they removed the kidney healed. But it was pretty straightforward. And in terms of long-term effects, I have not had any. Nothing has changed in my life other than instead of taking Advil, I take Tylenol if I have a headache. I'm told it's easier on the kidneys. I do a kidney function test every year as part of my physical. But other than that, everything is exactly the same. Did I need to change anything in my lifestyle before the surgery? I did not. I did not have to do anything in particular other than do all this testing. And what I wish I had known at the time is I wouldn't have waited for the recipient, my brother, to tell me where I could start the process. I would have done it myself, because in waiting for his green light, I wasted a lot of time. So that's my first recommendation to anybody who's a motivated donor. Just get in touch with the transplant center and tell them, and raise the flag or raise the hand and say you're interested in doing this, and start to do the paperwork, as was mentioned earlier. And the other thing I would say is, in my particular case, if I had to do it over again, I would have done the workup at the Toronto General Hospital in Toronto, a transplant center, for them to relay that information to Montreal, because then I would have had a case open already in Toronto, which would have made my life a little bit easier when I came back to Toronto for the follow-up post-transplant. So that would be my only thing that I would do differently. Not that it was like that bad when I came back, but it would just have made my life a little bit easier. And that's about it. I'll leave it to the next person to tell their story.
Thank you, Christine. I appreciate that. I'm sure we'll have some questions for you at the end. We're going to go to Sandy, also from Sunnybrook. And as Sandy starts, I'm going to do a quick poll as you're talking, Sandy, and see if we can find out who's with us tonight. Thanks.
Okay. Hi, my name is Sandy Epp, and I'm a TRAP ambassador with Sunnybrook Kidney Clinic at the CNIB. I am a living donor to my husband 8.5 years ago. My husband was a diabetic for 40 years, which slowly caused his kidneys to decline. His nephrologist at Sunnybrook told him in the fall of 2012 that he would soon need to go on dialysis or find a living donor. One of our adult sons volunteered, but my husband declined because he had a wife and young baby. So I asked if I could donate, not realizing my son said to me, "Mom, anybody can donate." So we began the workup. My workup was at the Toronto General, while my husband's was at Sunnybrook. Both our workups took about 6 months. In April of 2013, we found out that I was a perfect match. Very lucky. At that time, my husband's kidney function had plateaued to some extent. He was told that when he hits his wall or feels really, really bad, he will know it, and then they would book the surgery. Well, that happened a couple of months later in July, and we had our surgery 2 weeks later. Ours was a preemptive transplant. My husband never went on dialysis. My kidneys started working in his body right in the operating room. Our surgery was on a Tuesday. I was discharged by Thursday, 2 days later, and he was discharged by the next Monday. I have not felt any different having only one kidney, but have felt great joy in seeing my husband with lots of energy and feeling great. And yes, prior to COVID, we've been able to travel a lot. Within about 2 weeks of the surgery, we both felt pretty good, especially once the staples came out. My diet and medication didn't change at all from before or after the surgery, although my husband was able to eat a lot more foods. When we had our surgery, we didn't have anyone to share their experience of kidney transplantation. I think that would have been such a positive thing for us. We only had the transplant team to share their stories or tell us what they think would happen. It was such a, I could see how this type of thing would have been such a benefit to us. We both would have loved that, but we were very, very lucky to have lots of wonderful friends and family helping us on our journey.
Thank you, Sandy. That was great. We're going to now go over to one of our couples on the panel, Willie and Nettie.
Hello, we're Nettie and or Willie and Nettie, sorry. We do our volunteering as ambassadors at St. Joe's in Hamilton. We were both worked up in Hamilton, and that's where I had my transplant. I have still, even though I had a transplant, I still have polycystic kidney disease. PKD, short form for polycystic kidney disease, it's an inherited disorder which causes clusters of cysts to develop in your kidneys, causing your kidneys to enlarge and lose function over time. So that was the reason why I needed a transplant. And I will let Nettie continue with her story about her being a donor.
Willie's original donor was his brother, but that fell through. It just didn't work out. So then I decided, why wouldn't I get tested for him? I felt if we both wanted to have our lives back, we could do everything in life we wanted, like travel and work and enjoy life together again, and soon retirement. Why wouldn't I want to donate to him? So the process started. At 8%, Willie went on dialysis, but to be relying on a machine every other day was just not fun. You can imagine. My testing took roughly 8 months. I was his perfect match right to the very end. 2 weeks before surgery, we had our last cross match test. From there, things went downhill. Willie had antibodies that were attacking my cells, so we could no longer do it. How devastating that was. Then we went to see, or the doctor took me to another room where he kind of explained to me about the paired exchange. I didn't know much about it before, but it was a way to go. So our coordinators worked really hard together, and within 2 weeks, we had our donors together, and we had surgery 2 months later. Through that day, miraculously, we had 4 transplants in the circle chain from the paired exchange. What a day that was. Recovery was really easy for me, though. I'm not going to lie. The first few days were quite rough, but after 3 or 4 days, I felt better and better. After about a month, things were back to normal for me. Life resumed as if nothing changed for me. I'm on no medications and no special diets. All I can say was I was given 2 kidneys, one for me and one to share. Anything that I could say for it is it's nothing to stress about. What I'd like to say is do research, and always ask questions. I went with Willie to all of his doctor's appointments, and 4 years are always better than 2. So it's no big change to my life at all, other than the most gratifying experience I ever felt. Through me, Willie had a second chance on life, where hopefully we can both have a great future ahead of us. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Nettie and Willie, for your story. It's always, it's really inspiring to hear. We're going to go now to one of our 2 anonymous non-directed donors on the panel. Over to you, Wency.
Hi there. So my name is Wency, and I'm a volunteer at the St. Mike's St. Mike's Hospital in Toronto. I'm really thrilled to see all the living donors that are in the chat, and I'm especially thrilled to see a couple of non-directed donors in the chat as well. So I did most of my workup at St. Mike's, and I was also part of a paired donor exchange. So a part of my workup was also in London, Ontario, where I had the surgery. So I decided to become or to sign up to get worked up to be a non-directed donor in 2019. And there were a couple of things that kind of led me to decide to do that. The first was that I knew somebody who had passed away from kidney failure. This was a friend and colleague of mine who was overseas and didn't have the sort of medical resources to deal with his illness. The second reason is I'm a health journalist, and I had been writing a story about the need for donor organs, and it kind of struck me that I could do a little bit more than just write about it. Maybe I could actually, be a donor myself. So, and I guess there is a third thing that kind of came to mind is, I was healthy, I could do it, so why not? And that question, why not, just kind of nagged at me until I signed up. So the workup process for me took 8 months, which is probably took a little bit longer than others, just because with some of the tests, the doctors found some anomalies and just wanted to make triple sure that I was eligible, and I had a kidney biopsy So that actually made me feel really good because made me feel very reassured that we weren't going to proceed until we knew everything was a-okay. And so for me, like Christine, my recovery was quite quick. I was up and walking the very same day that I had my surgery. And also, like Christine, I think it was actually, my reaction to the painkillers that was actually worse than the surgery itself. So it took about, I took 3 weeks off of work. I probably could have gone back to work after the second week, but I did decide not to push it, and I went back to work on the 4th week after surgery, and really nothing in my life changed. I didn't have to do anything before the surgery or after to except, with the one exception is that I'll probably never have a career in in contact sports, but that's okay. And then I think the one thing I was pretty prepared to go through with it because I did a lot of research beforehand. But I think one thing that I didn't really know, and wish I did, was there's kind of like a weird discomfort about disclosing to people that you're going to be an organ donor. And I think I was not really prepared with people's reactions to it. Some people reacted in a way that kind of made me feel like, they kind of, the way I explained it is like they kind of placed a halo on my head that I didn't feel like I really deserved, like saying, you're this wonderful person for doing this, blah, blah, blah. Or, the other common reaction is like, why are you doing this? So I actually kind of kept it to myself for most of the workup, and it wasn't until I actually had a surgery date that I started telling even my family that I was going to be a donor. And I think I had I had someone in the transplant world to talk to about these kinds of things, that would have been really helpful. But anyway, that's my story. Thanks.
Thank you, Wency. Really tremendously inspiring to hear from you. We're going to go up to Angela to share her story about donating to her father.
Hi, everyone. I'm Angela. I am a TAP volunteer at Health Sciences North in Sudbury, so way up north. And I was a living donor to my father 10 years ago, so January of 2012. My father, when I was a kid, we discovered he had kidney issues. He changed his diet, though, and was perfectly fine for quite a number of years. And then near the end of 2009, he fell ill and was told that he was going to probably go on dialysis and need a kidney transplant. So he did end up starting dialysis. A lot of people, a handful of family and friends, did go through testing. Some were matches but couldn't donate for reasons such as age, kidney function, all that. And so I threw my hat in to try and see if I could donate. I too, like many of you, thought, why not? If I have a kidney to donate, why not donate? The hospital my father was initially registered with did not want to test me because I am a plus size lady, and just based off of my weight, I was refused to even begin testing. And then my father registered with London Health Sciences, and I approached them once he was registered and had some testing done down there, and they agreed to work with me as long as I was losing weight. So we had weekly check-ins with my coordinator. I did almost all of my workup up in Sudbury. So they sent through the paperwork, the forms, the blood work requests, the testing requests, everything through to me via email or to places up here, because my family doctor really didn't know anything from my knowledge about transplant. When I mentioned it to my family doctor, he didn't even know my blood type. So I worked through London and they accommodated me up here in Sudbury. Even the blood taking clinic up here, the guys there got to know me because I was in there so frequently. Some of my tests I had to do a couple of times, because my numbers were so good that they thought that there might be something wrong. So my kidney function was at 103%. So one of my kidneys was like functioning super well. And so that's what I did. I did it all up here in Sudbury. I lost weight. I lost 30 pounds, which was pleasing to the team down south. We did our final testing in 2011, near the end of the year. So in November, we drove down to London, my father and I, and did our final testing together. And 2 weeks later, I found out I was a match. Sorry, I get emotional, even though it's been 10 years, but so last week we celebrated 10 years since donating, and my father's doing excellent. I wasn't able to see him though because COVID and things are going on. We had planned a celebration, but we'll put it off until things are safe. Something I wish we had when I donated is someone or a group like this. Sorry. I had online friends that I made friends with that were donors, but they were in California and Georgia and all over the States. I didn't really know anybody in Canada, and especially not anybody locally. So I wish I had a group like this. I also wish that my medical professional, so my family doctor, had more knowledge. That would have been great, because it was kind of like, well, I don't know. I guess I was always thought that if you work in medicine, you would know about transplantation, but over the years, I've learned that's not the case. So yeah, so that's basically my story. I'm grateful for a group like this. I'm happy to volunteer. I'm happy to talk to people. I've only been part of TAP since last year, so all through COVID, basically. But I have been able to reach out to and help and speak to a few potential donors, and someone who actually donated last month in December, actually. And we've kept in touch, and she's doing wonderfully. So it's been very rewarding. So thank you.
Thank you, Angela. It's such an inspiration. Really appreciate you telling your story. We're going to go next to Nancy, Mackenzie Health. Oh, you're on mute, Nancy. Alex, are you able to unmute Nancy yourself, or should we go to the next? Maybe.
Yes, I can too, but I actually don't see her in the chat. So maybe if we want to just jump to the next.
We'll
Hello?
come. Are you there?
Hello? Yeah, I don't see my picture anymore, but
Okay.
anyway,
Go ahead. Yeah.
I'm here. Oh, there I am. Sorry about that. I just wanted to say to Angela, I said, you brought tears to my eyes. It was sort of relate us as donors. We certainly relate. I'm a TAP ambassador at Mackenzie Health in Richmond Hill, and have been for about 3 years. And I'm missing telling my story about being a donor. I am just overly thrilled at being a donor. It was the best, apart from giving birth to my 2 sons. It was the best experience of my life. And I gave birth to my 2 sons, but I was able to give life to my firstborn again. So giving life twice is amazing. My son, the way we started was he didn't know he had anything wrong with him until he was sort of bullied by a kid and pushed down, and he fell, a chair fell on his kidneys, and he had blood in his urine. And then they did these testing and stuff, and they found out that he had this IgA nephritis, and he would probably lose his kidneys at some point, which he did at age 29. And at the time, we didn't know anything about, like most people didn't know anything about donation and stuff like that. And I offered, like, I was gonna give him the kidney, but he wouldn't take it. He said, "Mom, it's a surgery and I wouldn't put you through that." And he said, and also if you went through that and I lost the kidney. He said, I wouldn't want to live. And he said, can you understand? And then I did understand. And the other thing is I didn't know that being older, that whether my kidney would be good for him. And he's a huge guy and I'm a small person. And I thought, well, maybe, he'd better be off with a younger kidney. And we didn't have much education. And this was like 8 years ago. We just celebrated our 8th anniversary, by the way, last week. But so anyway, he decided, he was very strict about that. He said, don't ask me again. And I knew he meant it. So he went on home hemodialysis, got trained for that. And he did it in his home for 5 years. And then he got an incompatible blood donor. And so he was able to, excuse me, he was able to, they were able to do this process called plasmapheresis, which they can change the blood to the donor's blood to him. And they could do a transplant. Unfortunately, he got extremely ill, like really, really ill from the process, which doesn't always happen, but it happened to him. And he got so sick, and I asked him again, please, will you let me give you? And he said, are you sure? And I said, oh, yeah. So anyway, like the other people have said, went through the process. Mine went fairly fast because they ended up having a cancellation in surgery. So it wasn't too hard. The hardest part, I think, for me was when you had to wait with a nephrologist. And well, he went through all the tests, like the results of the tests, and waiting to and seeing whether you were a donor, because I was so afraid I would let him down if I wasn't a donor. But it turned out I was a perfect match. So we did it. And what was kind of unique in the morning of the surgery at 7 o'clock in the morning, just before I was going in, one of our friends had called CHFI, and Erin Davis was on at the time. And she thought that was great. And she wanted us to talk about it as we were going in, which my son did. I wasn't really in the mood as I was being rolled into surgery. But anyway, so that happened. And on the part for me, both for him, he was fine. I was fine afterwards. I was maybe a few more days, a little bit longer, because I am older. And it took me a little bit more, but I was not, it's like I didn't feel much pain or much, you're just so thrilled that everything's working so well. And it's like my mom said when I was pregnant with being pregnant and but the thought about labor, she said, it's all, it's labor is something for a pain that you have that is for something wonderful. And so that made labor early better for me. So I thought about this for this pain that I'd be going through afterwards was from a miracle. It is like an organ, like to have your organ into somebody else and give them life is just unbelievably amazing. And every time I talk about it, I just feel the same way. And I wish I had 100 kidneys. I would do it again and again and again. It was so easy. And I would do it for a friend. I would donate it anonymously. Like it is such a good process. I'm not saying that just because I went through it for my son. I would do it again. Honest to God, I would do it again. It is such an easy process. And I was back as everybody else has said, I'm the same person. I don't have to worry about my diet. Yes, the Advil, it was no big deal. But other than that, it was great. And I was ready and able to go back to work probably much earlier. I did take the time off just to be sure as a teacher, and kids can run you ragged. So I decided to take the time at going back. But it is one of the most best experiences and the greatest gift that you can give somebody in life. So, I just think that, but I would say I would wish that there would be more education. I think the TAP program is doing that, is giving people education. And we're spreading the word for donors, because I've had a lot of people tell me that, oh, I didn't know that. So, yeah, I would do this again and again. I'm just beaming with joy over this. And yeah, right. Somebody else said about not being like, people look at you with a halo on your head just to call you a hero. That's right. You don't feel that, right? You don't feel you're the hero. I just feel blessed that I was the one that was able to do that. So I hope other people will consider what we're saying tonight and take that to heart and if they're ever considering being a donor, and spread the word. Thank you.
Thank you, Nancy. That was amazing. Appreciate it. We're
Thanks.
going to go up to Beth and Mike, although I think Beth is going to be doing most of the talking and Mike is there for moral support.
That's right.
Hi, everyone. My name's Beth. This is my husband, Mike. And we're TAP ambassadors with Trillium Hospital, new ambassadors just since 2021. And we had our workup at ECMC Hospital in Buffalo, New York. So we met in December 2018, and at that point, I didn't know anything about kidney disease or transplants. But just 3 months after we met, Mike was diagnosed with stage 4 kidney disease. And his disease was caused by high blood pressure a couple of years earlier. So I decided right away in May that I wanted to get tested. I didn't know whether I wanted to donate, but I was curious to see if I was a match. So our workup process had a few sort of unusual aspects to it. The first is that Mike's American and our surgeries were going to take place in the US. So all of my testing had to take place in the US as well. So that added some time and complication to the process. And for that reason, just the very beginning stage of the process to find out if I was a match, that itself took 4 months. But in September 2019, we found out I was a match. And that's kind of where our process took another unusual turn, because in October 2019, we got married. And at that point, we actually decided to stop my workup process. As a few people have mentioned, it's a really difficult process emotionally, it can be, and we were both very conflicted. Mike was conflicted about my donating, I was conflicted about donating, and we were in a really unusual situation too, where we didn't have any friends or family in Buffalo. So we would be having surgery with no support and no caregivers. So we decided to stop the process so that I could be his caregiver instead of his donor. And we got him on the deceased donor list, and we waited and hoped for 3 months that he would get a call, and that call never came. And meanwhile, he was getting sicker and sicker. And in January 2020, we were told that he had to start dialysis immediately. So at that point, I said, that's it. I want to start my workup back again. And Mike finally agreed. And we started the process again, and we had our surgery in July. So my workup took just over a year total, with all the stops and starts and twists and turns. So in terms of recovery, I was back at work after 2 months. I would say it took more like 3 months before I was completely, fully recovered in every possible way. But having said that, within 2 weeks, after the surgery, I was doing most of regular activities. Long-term effects, like most people have said, I don't have any. We're coming up to 2 years post-surgery, and I'm the same as I was before. Changes before and after surgery. Before, I had to stop taking some supplements that I took prior to the surgery. And after, like everyone said, no Advil or migraine medication that I used to take. I can't take that anymore, but none of that's a big deal. And in terms of things I wish I'd known, there's really it's twofold. When we were going through our process, we were fortunate enough, thankfully, through the TAP program to talk to other donors and recipients. And that was invaluable for us, but every person's experience, as you can tell, is very unique. And all of the donors I had spoken to felt like they had a really easy surgery and an easy recovery. And it wasn't exactly that way for me, especially the recovery in the hospital. So I wish I had maybe some more realistic expectations going in. I think that would have made it easier for me at the time. But the most important thing I wish I'd known earlier is just that this was absolutely the right decision for us. We really struggled with it. You know, seeing Mike just a few months after the surgery, he was a completely different person. You know, a whole healthy person that I had never even seen because he had been sick the entire time we had known each other. So it was absolutely the right decision. And that was, you know, in large part to TAP, who was a huge part of our journey. So we're happy to be here and be giving back, and that's our story.
Thank you, Beth and Mike. Anything you want to add, Mike? Or you?
Yeah, hi, everybody. I won't take too much time. I would want to say, and Beth touched upon it, really as a recipient, it's really important to recognize what mixed feelings you have and what complicated feelings go into this. And in our case, having really literally having just met a few months before our diagnosis, my diagnosis, it was really just a complicating factor. And I think that, you know, in terms of time, length of time, knowing each other, our situation is probably a little different. But however long you know each other, and whether it's a friend or family member, the decision to donate is profoundly personal. And the recipient, you've got to realize, isn't, and I think some of our speakers have touched upon this, it isn't really easy to be a recipient and to have this person do this wonderful thing for you. And you know, I think what I've learned from the process is, you know, it probably would have made things a little easier for Beth had I just sort of sat back and let her make this decision and do what she wanted to do in the first place, which was to donate. You know, we would have had a shorter workup process, and I think the process overall would have been a little faster and perhaps a little bit easier for both of us. So moral to the story is these donors are all wonderful people, and as recipients, we should let them do what they want to do.
Very well spoken, Mike. Thank you. And thank you, Beth. Amazing. So we're going to go over to Sean in Hamilton.
Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm Sean, and I volunteer at St. Joe's Hospital in Hamilton. And like Wency and Angela, my workup and surgery was in London, Ontario. I donated to my sister 8 years ago, so November of 2013. And in terms of what led up to that, we really had no idea that there was any issue whatsoever with any of us as far as kidney disease. My sister had well, still has a blood condition that had been dormant. She never knew she had it. We never knew she had it. And it struck in March of 2012. She thought she had the flu, and her kidneys just shut down. So she was admitted to hospital and immediately went on dialysis. And she was on dialysis for about 6 months until she was actually approved as a potential recipient. And at that time, myself and another sister decided to go through and get tested to see if we would be a match and eligible donors. So we were fortunate in that two of us went through the testing process together. That was extremely helpful because we could share, you know, our feelings, our thoughts, our concerns. The TAP program didn't exist at that time, so there was, you know, other than the transplant coordinator, there really was, you know, in the medical staff, there really wasn't anyone that we knew of to speak with about, you know, their experience through it. So, but the two of us going through the testing together was a big help. In terms of the time it took, so we both live, you know, an hour and a half, 2 hours away from London. So we tried to coordinate days for the testing, and it took about 8 months to get through the testing. I was approved first, and then waited until my sister completed the testing, and we were both eligible donors. So we were both approved to be donors. It ended up being me, And in terms of the surgery, like a few others have mentioned, it was about 3 days. I went in on a Wednesday morning. I was home Saturday morning. The recovery, the first day, you definitely know something happened, and I think I was up and able to walk around the next morning, and just honestly, once I was able to get up and walk around, immediately felt quite a bit better. I was able to go see my sister, who was on a different floor of the hospital, but was able to go and see her several times, and a recovery. I got home Saturday morning. I was off the next week and started to work from home the following week, and I was back at work in 2 weeks. Now, I don't do anything terribly physical at work, so that was. But I've been fine since then. No restrictions, no serious medical issues, nothing, no serious. In fact, I'm probably healthier now than I was beforehand. So I appreciate Angela's comment, because I too was encouraged to lose some weight prior to surgery, because it would have been safer for me, as well as increase my chances of being a successful donor. So thank you, Angela, for mentioning that. And just in terms of what I wish I had known earlier, I think similar to what others have said, just being able to talk to someone who had been through the process would have been extremely helpful. And I think that's why we all volunteer.
Thank you so much, Sean. Appreciate that. And now we're going to go over to Tom, one of your colleagues in Hamilton. Tom, you're on mute.
Okay. My name's Tom, and I did my workup at St. Joe's Hospital, and I ended up donating to somebody anonymously in Montreal as part of the Paired Exchange program. Now, my original recipient was the son of friends of ours who live in Vancouver. I did not know him. I'd only met him once as an adult, but he lost function of both of his kidneys. He needed help, and so I threw my hat into the ring, and it all worked out very well. Originally, I went to my family doctor just to ask some general questions about being a donor. I didn't say I had anybody specific in mind. And he hummed and hawed. He said, you're getting up there, you're not as young as you used to be. And that's how we left it. And so I remember walking out of his office saying, well, I'm not as young as I used to be. But anyway, a few weeks after, and I decided we'll put it on hold for a while. And a few weeks later, we happened to be having a dinner with friends of ours who live up the street. And one of the people there was a good friend of ours, and she's also a doctor. And I mentioned that, well, I'm a little too old. I was thinking about donating a kidney to so-and-so. And she stopped and she looked at me and said, you're not too old, as long as you're healthy. And that changed my direction immediately after that. So we walked into the hospital and started doing the paperwork and the testing and so on and so on. Turned out I was not a match for my guy in Vancouver, because that's where he was living, of course. And so we joined the Paired Exchange program. From beginning to end, the whole process took about 1.5 years because there were a few setbacks. I was in a chain with 5 pairs, 10 of us all together. Somebody got sick, the chain collapsed. We had to start over again, but eventually it all worked out. So there were 5 pairs right across Canada. It was just amazing, our medical system here in Canada. There were 5 donations in the morning, kidneys removed, 5 donations in the afternoon, kidneys put in. And that was all within a day or 2 days right across Canada. It was really quite amazing. So yes, I was 65 when I eventually donated my kidney. So I was officially a senior, and I was in the Paired Exchange program, which worked out very well for us. To recover, not long, same as everybody else, more or less. Even at my age, the nephrologist said, well, you know, here we go with the age again. But, you know, typically takes people about 3 months, but, you know, maybe twice as long for you. But nah, within a few weeks, I was feeling well. I really was. And any changes? No, I'm healthy today as I ever was. I just take care. My wife was with me all the way. She makes sure I eat properly. Speaking of eating, one of the nice things that somebody mentioned about the nephrologist taking care of you. We go back for a exam once a year, and they check, make sure you're okay. They take very good care of you. I know when I first walked into the hospital and met the nephrologist, and even meetings after that, he said, my concern is with you. You know, if you have any questions, if you ever decide you don't want to do this, no problem. You know, you have to make this decision yourself, but I'm here to take care of you. And it made me feel comfortable to know that they weren't going to let me do anything that would be dangerous to me. So that was very comforting. But when I did go in one time, you have to get blood work a couple of weeks before you go in for your tests. And my potassium was high. And I thought, you know, what's potassium? But as it turned out, too much potassium is a little hard on your kidneys. And he said, you know, you need to cut down on your potassium. It wasn't a big deal, but he said that. And I said, yeah, okay, fine. And they give you this chart, and it had all the different foods that are high in potassium, medium in potassium, low in potassium. And all my favorite foods are loaded with potassium. So potatoes, loaded with potassium, oranges, potassium, bananas, of course, potassium, oranges. Yeah, there was about 4 of them. They're all my favorite foods. But anyway, so that was easy to do. We just cut down on that, and everything was fine after that. What to share with wish I'd known before. The workup is long, for sure, and lots of tests and so on. But what I say to people, and what I would suggest to other potential donors, is that there's an old expression that says, they say, when you know, it's not the goal when you're on a journey. It's not the destination. It's not the goal that's important. It's the journey. Well, not in this case. The journey has its ups and downs, but it's the destination. It's the goal. Keep your eye on the goal. That's what counts. You know, going to the hospital, getting the tests and so on it is what it is. But keep your eye on the goal, and that's what you need to do, because it turns out to be very good. And that's about it for me. Everything worked out well. I'm happy today. And my guys, even though he doesn't have my kidney, we pretend that he does. So that's how we all worked it out. Thank you.
Great, Tom. Thank you. We just have 2 more people on our panel. We will stay a little bit longer for questions if anyone has any. So next up to Barb, also on the Hamilton team.
Oh, Hamilton.
Oh, Hamilton.
Hi, everyone. My name is Barb, and as you mentioned, I volunteer at St. Joseph's Hospital in Hamilton, and I also help out at Trillium. I donated my kidney in January of 2018 to my husband, so similar to Mike and Beth, and it was a direct donation. And you know, for us, it was a little bit different because we had years and years to be prepared. My husband was diagnosed shortly after we were married with focal segmental glomerular sclerosis, or FSGS. And, you know, we were fortunate that it was a chronic disease. So he was managed medically for almost 20 years. And because of that, living with chronic kidney disease, even though his health was declining, it allowed us time to not only discuss about, you know, me being a donor, but it helped us prepare. And we also had a physician who was very comfortable very early on talking to us about the potential of me being a living donor. My husband was not comfortable asking any friends or family. You know, it's something, you know, now being part of the TAP program, about having conversations and recognizing how difficult it is for somebody who lives with kidney disease to be that person who actually, you know, approaches and says, hey, I need a kidney. But in our situation, that was difficult for him, but he also had a long family history of kidney disease. So that was one of the reasons he didn't want to approach anyone. But for me, you know, similar to Willie and Nettie, you know, it wasn't a question for me. You know, it was our lives. I was affected very much with his chronic illness and wanted to see him well. And you often hear when people see somebody who is not well. I wish I could do something. And in this situation, you can. And so that there was no question. So similar to everyone else, my workup process was about 6 to 8 months. And the only difference, though, our plan was always to do a preemptive transplant. We actually had our surgeries booked. I was a match. And at the very last, my husband was diagnosed with a medical condition he wasn't aware of. So the transplant surgery was put on hold. And unfortunately, he had to go on dialysis while he was treated for that medical condition. So we chose home hemo. We were both working at the time. He wanted to have some control over his disease, and we started home hemo. But then within 8 months, the medical teams came back and said they wanted us to proceed with the transplant. So he was only on dialysis a short time, and we went ahead with the surgeries. Like everyone else, I'd never had surgery before, never taken anything stronger than a Tylenol. So the first few days were pretty rough, I'm not going to lie. I think it was partly because of the anesthetic and from the pain medications that I wasn't used to. And I remember that first 24 hours, I probably wasn't looking so good. And the doctors, sort of joked and said, I think this will be the first time in transplant history that the recipient goes home before the donor. And that's all that it took for me to, say, that's not going to happen. So I was discharged after 2 days, probably within a week, once pain control was managed, I was feeling well. I was pretty, active and tried to maintain a fairly healthy lifestyle before. I didn't change anything going into the surgery. But the one thing that was very important for me was, and I do share the story, that I like to run long distances. I wasn't sure whether that would happen, would I feel differently, but I can tell you that I feel no different than I did with 2 kidneys as I do with 1. And within 8 weeks of the surgery, I participated in Around the Bay. If anyone knows the race. Now, I didn't run the 30K that year. I ran a 5K race, but it was a goal of mine. And, I continue to run today. So we're both doing well. The one thing, we share our story a lot. And I think one of the big myths or misconceptions about living donation is that non-relatives can be successful donors, either direct or in the paired exchange. And I think all of us are evidence sharing our stories tonight that that is very possible. And it's, why we share our story. So thank you.
Thank you, Barb. You did a great job squeezing that all in 2.5 minutes. Appreciate your story. It's amazing. So last but not least, we're going to go to our second anonymous non-directed donor on the panel. Mr. Len, you're up.
Well, hi, everyone. My name is Len. I'm a volunteer with TAP at Trillium Health Partners, and I'm a non-directed living liver and kidney donor. And I had both of those surgeries at Toronto General Hospital. So in 2018, at Christmas time, my wife and I were watching a movie. And in the movie, a woman gets sick and a stranger steps up and donates a part of his liver to her. And that was what got me started down this path of being a living donor. And so later in 2019, I donated about 20% of my liver to a child at Sick Kids. And that went amazingly well. So a little while after that, I started volunteering at Toronto General, and I saw so many people having to deal with dialysis and kidney disease, and that made me decide to become a kidney donor as well. So in 2020, I started the whole process over again, and I kicked off a kidney paired exchange. And so in the end, I don't know, a bunch of people got a transplant. I don't know the exact number. I've done the donor workup twice, obviously, once for the liver donation and once again for the kidney. A ridiculous number of blood tests and a ton of imaging. What I did find interesting is how much you learn about your own health. I was told that I had Gilbert syndrome, that's a liver condition, and that I have a hole between the chambers of my heart. Apparently lots of people do, as it turns out. And the kidney team seemed, quite concerned about it. So I had to see a cardiologist, and that meant even more testing. But in the end, all was good. And I was given the thumbs up to donate a kidney. The workup took some time, but for me, it was actually comforting. it showed just how thorough the transplant team is, like making sure you're a good candidate to donate. And by the way, just a note, never assume that you can't be a donor because because you might have some health issue. Both my heart and liver conditions turned out to be no big deal. So if you or someone are considering being a donor, let the testing prove if you're a good candidate or not. And so anyway, it was around the middle of 2021 that I donated my left kidney. Again, the surgery went really, really well. It was a laparoscopic procedure, so I have 4 small incisions on my left side and a longer one below my belly button. I was in the hospital for 3 days. I walked a lot. I walked and walked and walked. I mastered the technique for getting out of bed without aggravating the incision. There's just a right way to do that. But you know what? I can honestly say that I really didn't experience much pain. Once I got home, again, I didn't really have any problems. I tried to stick to the, don't lift anything over 10 pounds rule for a couple of months. The biggest problem I had to deal with was that my underwear waistband sat right on top of that incision. So it was quite uncomfortable. It was always a battle of, do I pull it up or do I push it down and get it away from that? But anyway, as far as my recovery, after I got home, I walked every day. I went to the end of the street the first day. I went around the block the second day. And within about 2 weeks, I could walk a few kilometers and I was able to do most of my usual things at home. At 7 weeks, I actually started swimming laps in the community center pool. There was one little bump. And at about 5 weeks, I ended up going to the emergency department with a really bad pain in my side. And given that I just donated a kidney, they were really, being cautious. So they did a bunch more tests. And it turns out that it was probably just a pulled muscle. It went away within about a week. But in hindsight, now that I look back on what happened, the lesson learned is at 5 weeks post, don't try to cut the grass, even with a tiny electric mower, even if you feel great. Anyway, so, continuing on from there, 3-month and 6-month follow-up tests all looked great. All the numbers were really good. So what life changes did I have to make before or after the surgery? Well, beforehand, I just tried to eat well, do some reasonable exercise, nothing over the top, but, things like Pilates and a little bit of cardio. And since then, I've done pretty much the same. Same for diet. I think we've always eaten pretty healthy. So I didn't do anything too special for that, before or after. If there was one thing I could have done differently, it would be to eat light the day before the surgery. The night before my liver donor surgery, I went to my granddaughter's birthday party and I had, a small salad and a small piece of fish. And I thought that was light enough, but I can tell you it was not. It felt like it was stuck in me for like the next 3 days. And I ate even lighter before the kidney surgery, but again, still not light enough. So, I'm not suggesting that you eat very little because I don't know, I think you need the energy, but, find something that's easily digested or talk to a dietitian and get it right. And so that's me and my kidney to go story. I don't have a regret for a second having done this, and I do it again in a minute.
Thank you. Thank you, Len. And thank you to all our amazing panelists. You guys are so inspiring every time I hear your story. I'm going to stop recording at this